Okay, so now we're looking at indent repairs. This is a section of the same carved panel in Bath stone from the building in Pembrokeshire, but in this instance, as well as minor loss that we were treating with mortar repair on the previous panel, there's a chunk missing from this corner, as we can see. The remaining detail is still clear enough and has enough value that I would want to retain this stone. So what we're going to do is cut out a section of this corner and make a piece of stone, an indent repair to that corner. And the first thing we need to do then is establish the parameters of where that stone is going to go to. So I'd normally want to cut out a clean socket or fillet into which to fit the new stone. As you can see, this stone is not the same depth all the way through. It looks like it might have been the veiny edge of a quarry block, and it's a little bit mean on this top left corner, and that's part of the reason I suspect that we've lost that area. But we need to get a decent bond onto which to pin a new piece of stone. So I think we're going to cut down to around this line and probably back, including that slightly friable leaf there, so that we get a bond down to this kind of area here. Bath stone being very soft, or soft in terms of stone at least, is cuttable using a handsaw. And so what we're going to do is mark that up and handsaw off a chunk of that. I will finish that with chisels to get a square pocket and maybe rubbing blocks, but the bulk of that material can be cut out, and actually it puts less pressure and less force on the remaining stone. Decided to knock it out with a mallet and chisel. So I'm just forming an approximate line to cut out the bulk of the damaged material and that thin friable section there. I'm using here actually a wood saw, a cheap readily available wood saw, which work just as well as anything else on Bath stone, though they don't last too long when you start using them for stone. Same line there. As I say, I'm taking the bulk of the material out with the saw, and then we'll square up using chisels to make an accurate pocket for the new stone. All right. And using a square, I'll take out the excess. and tidy that one up. Right, so we've cut out the defective square of stone there that we're looking to indent, and I've just been cleaning that back to a clean surface with a .90 angle approximately. We'll fine tune that, but that gives me the measurement then to cut our replacement piece of stone, and that's what I'll do next. So I'm off to cut a piece of stone to fit in there, and the next step will be to mark up any carving. Okay, so I've cut a piece of stone and marked up the exact size we need here to fit our pocket on the stone to be repaired. I'm keeping the excess on this at the moment because I want to try and rough out some of the carving before we bond it to the block, and that way it's only trimming in and finishing that we need to do once it's a part of that stone. I've taken a rough template there which I took from what was remaining on that carved panel, and I've sort of extrapolated it to form the ends of the leaves. That's a rough guide for me to apply to this new piece of stone. So I'm just drawing around that carefully, and that will form the rough guide for carving out some of that unneeded material. There we go. The reason I haven't cut that small piece off the block yet is because it will bounce around when I'm trying to shape it. Instead of working it on the banker, on the workbench here, I'm going to pop it in this flat bucket of sand, and that will just help stop the stone bouncing around when I'm shaping it. Okay, so we got the intersection of the two leaves here, and one is behind the other. I'm just going to, with a small chisel, cut around the outside lines and try and find those and roughly shape them up. The carving on the original is it's not the finest detail. It's a little bit crude. You can see chisel marks in the back, but it works and it's effective, and so we're going to try and mimic that kind of detail for the new piece. The very top of this piece of stone has a chamfered frame running around it, or at least along the top edge. So I'm just going to approximate that to make sure we've got that stone available once it all goes back together. Okay, so now we've roughed out the carving detail for the replacement piece. I've cut off the excess. I say this is bath stone, so that's using a handsaw. I've still left a little bit of spare on this, which we'll have to trim off afterwards, but we're looking now to bond that in position round about there. And we're going to use some stainless steel dowels for the purpose, to make sure that's a nice solid bond. Now, to bond the dowels we might use either polyester resin or lime. We're using lime in this case, a fairly loose pure lime mix around the dowels, and that way the process is reversible, so we can take this section off again. The danger of using the resin is it becomes something that's a problem later on if any further work needed to be done, or for some reason that section needed to be removed. So I've marked up a couple of drill holes on that bed joint, and I'm going to drill those out for the dowels now. And again, I'm using a sharp drill bit, no percussion, no hammer action on the drill, which could potentially damage the stone. And the same on the indent. I've pre-cut some stainless steel threaded dowels. Just going to try in there. And the moment of truth then. Will they fit? There we go. So it's just sliding into place there. And that's holding. I'm quite happy with the position on here. I feel a bit more depth to cut out this new piece so that it meets the old, and a little bit more in the background material. I've got more stock on this new piece than existed on the old, but as I explained earlier, that is part of the reason that that corner failed. It didn't have enough, so it's more comparable with what we've got on this end of the block. And on the inside of when this stone is rebuilt in position, and we'll build that back in with a lime mortar bed and pointed with lime. Back in behind here is a core built up of stone and lime mortar, so the shape of that inside isn't a concern at the moment. Right, I'm happy with that, and so I'm going to carefully remove that again. We'll clear out, I'll blow out the holes, and we're going to bond that using some pure lime mortars that I've slaked earlier. Some pure lime, nice little putty there, and we'll use that for joint on here as well. The remaining visible joints we'll use the mortar repair mortar that we made earlier. So I've doweled and bonded that indent now onto the original block, and carefully I want to just fill the remaining joint. I'll get a better sprayer with some of the mortar repair mortar that matches the bath stone that you saw us mixing up earlier. So I'm just going to chop that into the joint and make sure that's well packed. Chopping it in with the side of the so that will just secure it a little bit more and pack any minor joints between the two. and that will allow me to trim the excess off the new piece shortly. Okay, so I've finished pointing in and jointing in that indent with the Bathstone mortar, and I've just trimmed off the excess now on the new block. So it's fitting reasonably well, but I need to just trim in a little bit more of the carving, get a little bit more depth around here, and then we'll be pretty much done. What we will do with this stone is we'll be mixing up a little shelter coat to feed any little surface friable sections on the old material, and give it a little bit of protection. It'll also help to kind of, in the short term, blend in the new work with the old work. Because a lot of old material is going back on this project, we will look at shelter coating the entire thing. Now, that's not necessarily just to make it look as one, it does actually offer some protection and surface consolidation as well. We'll get into that shortly. Bit of undercutting on these leaves just to get a little bit more definition. And that's coming up to the edge of the block. And in there, the surface just needs to come down a tiny bit more to meet the original. Okay, so now I've finished trimming in that indent repair, a little bit tidying on the carving that could still be done, but the essence of the thing is there, and the joint is pointed up. So the next treatment we're going to give this piece of stone is a shelter coat. Now, a shelter coat is essentially a liquid lime with very fine aggregates. It's breathable, it's sacrificial, so it won't stay on forever like you're coating it with some kind of paint. It won't harm the stone, in fact it helps it, it feeds any little fissures and cracks, and it consolidates any remaining slightly friable or porous surfaces. And in addition to that, it will help to sort of unify those new and old repairs. We're using quicklime, a hot mixed shelter coat. So we're slaking the lime and we're mixing in fine stone dust. Again, we're going to be using the bath stone dust because it's a match for the texture, colour. The lime's going to effectively kind of bring a couple of shades lighter. So in order to combat that and end up with a comparable colour, we're going to add some of this dust, which is a hamstone dust. Very similar, part of the same belt of limestone as the Bathstone came from, a bit further down. And it's a little bit dark, a little bit more orangey, as you can see. So with the addition of this into the shelter coat, it's going to darken up that resultant mix. As luck would have it, I can show you some here that I've mixed up already. So if you want to have a look at that, the object of the shelter coat when it's wet would be to approximate the colour of wet stone. So I think if you look at those two tones, we're not far out there. Quantities, I've used 1.5 Bathstone, 1 hamstone and 1 quicklime. The quicklime doubles in volume, so effectively it's quite lime rich. And that's been slaked and mixed and enough water added so that it's about the consistency of single cream, something like that. We don't want it to go on so thick, particularly not with a detailed piece of carving like this, because there's so many sort of crevices and pockets in there that we could end up sort of filling it and flattening the carving, and that's not what we want. We want to protect it and enhance it, but we don't want to fill up all of those little voids. So we're going to put it on fairly carefully. I'm going to pre-wet this stone. Again, it's very porous, it's quite a dry day, so I'm pre-wetting this so it doesn't dry on contact. And the object is that we put this on not too thickly, but coat it evenly, and we're going to rub it back or brush it back to remove any excess and maybe apply a second coat. So there we go. That's what. I'm just using a normal brush here, but you can see here how well it coats on. And because of the weathered surface of this stone, we're going to have to sort of stipple it in like that to make sure that the lime mix, the shelter coat, is actually covering all those surfaces evenly. You can see a couple of places there. We can see a bit of the brush mark from applying it. It's showing through, and that shows me that we've got a little bit more than we want there, but as I say, we'll rub off the excess and reapply as required. It's not a paint, and we've got to remember that it's not a paint. It's a surface coating, yes, but it's a lime treatment and not a paint, and so we'll allow that stone to continue breathing. That is to say, it will allow water, moisture to pass in and out of the surface, so it will get wet, and to a certain extent it will soak up the water, but it will dry back out of the surface again, as would the natural stone. Okay, so there we have the nearly completed repair. The shelter coat has a little bit of drying to do for the purposes of making this video. We've applied it a little sooner than we might have, and the stone will need a little bit of drying out, so that will tone down a little bit, and we expect that to come up a shade or two lighter to match the raw bath stone. So to recap what we've done today, we've looked at the repairs, we've looked at the needs for repair. We've got the mortar repair, the mortar mixing, the indent repair, and the pinning in, pointing and lime washing to complete. Next time we'll be looking at pointing, and to a certain extent we'll have to delve into mortars to do so, grouting and lime washing.